It began as a quiet Tuesday morning in the mountains of western Maryland. The streets of Westernport were calm, the air heavy with the scent of rain. Children walked to school, shop doors opened along Main Street, and the steady rhythm of small-town life carried on as if nothing unusual was coming. But above the ridges, dark clouds were already gathering, slow, heavy, and merciless. By early afternoon, the sky had turned the color of steel. Thunder rumbled through the valley, and within minutes, rain began to fall in relentless sheets. The ground, already soaked from earlier storms, couldn't hold another drop. Water raced down the hillsides, gathering speed as it rushed toward George Creek below. Then, without warning, the creek broke its banks. In mere hours, Westernport was underwater. Cars floated down Main Street like leaves in a torrent. Storefronts vanished beneath a brown, churning flood. Familiar landmarks were erased beneath a surge that refused to stop. This wasn't a hurricane or a dam failure, it was a flash flood. Sudden, violent, and merciless. In less than 6 hours, the water rose 7 feet, heights not seen since 1996. Streets turned into rivers. Schools became islands, and homes that had stood for generations were swallowed whole. When the rain finally eased, Westernport was unrecognizable. The water receded, but the silence it left behind told a story of loss, disbelief, and a community forever changed by a flood no one saw coming. The storm that drowned Westernport began far beyond the mountains. A slow-moving, low-pressure system drifted from the Midwest, settling over Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. At first it seemed harmless, a steady October rain. But it refused to move. Hour after hour the clouds thickened, pouring endless moisture into the valleys below. By midday, the rain turned into an assault, sheets of water hammering rooftops and back roads without pause. Some areas saw up to 5 inches in just a few hours. The ground, already drenched, failed completely. Water streamed down the steep hillsides like liquid glass, carving new paths through yards and fields. In the narrow valley of George Creek, everything converged. What was once a calm trickle became a roaring monster, surging higher by the minute. Storm drains backed up, small bridges trembled, and residents began to realize this wasn't an ordinary storm. It was a disaster. Meteorologists warned that the system wasn't moving. For Westernport, it was the perfect storm. A slow, stalled weather cell colliding with steep, fragile terrain. By the time the rain reached its peak, the town's fate was sealed. By early afternoon, Westernport was losing its battle. What started as puddles along curbs turned into rushing rivers through the streets. Storm drains overflowed, sending water back into the very town they were meant to protect. The rain's roar grew deafening, mixed with sirens, shouting, and the crash of collapsing walls. Main Street vanished beneath torrents of brown water. Vehicles drifted aimlessly, smashing into storefronts and lampposts before being swept away. Basement windows shattered, doors burst open, and family treasures, photographs, furniture, memories were carried off by the current. Every minute brought another collapse, another loss. George Creek had fully overtaken its banks, slicing the town in half. Power lines sparked and transformers exploded, plunging neighborhoods into darkness. The air smelled of gasoline and mud. People scrambled to rooftops, clutching pets and belongings, clinging to anything that could keep them above the flood. For those trapped inside, there was nothing to do but wait. Phone signals failed and calls for help went unanswered. The valley that once offered safety had turned into a basin of chaos. An inland sea where homes and history were drowned in silence. By the time rescuers arrived, the water was too deep, too fast, too powerful. Westernport, a quiet mountain town, had become a ghost of itself, rewritten by water. As the rain poured on, George Creek transformed before anyone could react. What had been a peaceful stream hours earlier turned into a raging beast, devouring everything in its path. By mid-afternoon, gauges recorded an unimaginable surge, 7 feet in 6 hours. Streets vanished under brown water. Cars collided and drifted. Wooden fences splintered. Even rescue trucks couldn't move through the current. Families grabbed what they could, photos, medicine, pets, and fled to higher ground. For many, it was too late. By evening, George Creek had destroyed Westernport's defenses. The water rushed through basements, schools, and streets, carrying decades of memories away. As night fell, it became clear. This wasn't just another storm. It was Maryland's worst flood in nearly 30 years. At Westernport Elementary School, panic turned to courage. By the time the sirens wailed, the building was surrounded. Water surged across the parking lot, climbed stairways, and pressed against classroom doors. Within an hour, it reached the second floor, trapping more than 150 students and 50 staff members. Teachers moved children to upper hallways, handing out snacks, trying to keep them calm as the storm raged outside. Parents waited helplessly as rescue crews struggled through the current. Roads were gone. Bridges had vanished. Across Allegany County, the same scenes unfolded: schools on lockdown, buses stranded, power failing. The region's infrastructure simply couldn't cope. When rescuers finally reached the school, they had to use small boats, ferrying children out in freezing, debris-filled water. Each trip was a fight against the current, but every child was saved. As the last boat left, rescuers looked back at the dark building, now surrounded by water, and knew how quickly an ordinary day could turn into a fight for survival. Throughout the night, emergency teams from across the county poured into Westernport. Firefighters, paramedics, and volunteers braved the flood, launching boats into streets that had become rivers. Floodlights flickered against the brown waves as rescuers went door to door, calling out for survivors. Radios crackled with news of missing residents, collapsed homes, blocked roads. Power was out. Darkness swallowed the town. Some responders worked 14 hours straight, refusing to rest. By midnight, over 100 people had been rescued and taken to temporary shelters. Churches and community centers opened their doors, offering food and warmth. The storm had tested everyone, professionals and ordinary citizens alike, turning neighbors into heroes. Still, the rain wouldn't stop. As hours dragged on, the people of Westernport fought not just the water, but the creeping fear that the night might never end. When morning finally came, silence returned. Streets once filled with laughter lay buried under mud and ruin. The smell of soaked wood and diesel filled the air. Porches had collapsed, cars lay overturned, power lines drooped across debris. For many, it was impossible to tell where the creek ended and the town began. Rescue gave way to recovery. Neighbors helped neighbors. Volunteers brought food and blankets. First responders, exhausted but unbroken, stayed to rebuild what the flood had taken. But beneath that resilience lingered a truth. This wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a warning. Across America, flash floods like this are becoming more frequent, powered by storms that are stronger, slower, and more unpredictable. The flood that swallowed Westernport was once a once-in-a-lifetime event. Now, those lifetimes are getting shorter. Westernport will rebuild. Its people will endure. But the question remains: how many more towns will have to drown before we start preparing for the storms we know are coming? Because the next flood isn't a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. So, if this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Help this message spread. Like this video to support climate awareness. Share it so others understand what's coming. Subscribe for more real-world disaster documentaries and urgent global coverage.